What up, data nerds? I'm Luke, and welcome to my channel where I make data visualization easy. In this video today, we're going to be talking about a really important topic when it comes to Python, and that is virtual environments. And this is a topic that whenever you're new to Python, it may be very confusing, and it's really important that you understand some of the basics such as packages and package managers and how they interact with the virtual environment. So I'm hoping with this video to actually show how this all relates together and to better understand virtual environments. As a quick overview of this video, the first part is going to focus on packages and package management, what it is. We're going to give some quick examples behind how they are utilized. And then from there, we're going to go into the computer and actually use the Anaconda distribution to manage packages. For the second part, we're going to move into virtual environments, explaining what virtual environments are, what the problem they're trying to solve, and show an example of how you could run into this problem. And then finally, we're going to jump into the computer again, and we're going to be using this virtual environments with the Anaconda distribution. So with that, let's jump right in. To understand packages and package managers, let's go over a simple example first. So let's say this is your computer operating system, and we open a terminal or command prompt. From here, we can install Python on our machine. And if you're interested in installing Python via the Anaconda distribution, I have a link above for how to do that. From here, once we install Python, it's installed locally on our computer. So Python is great. It has a lot of built-in functions and properties within it. So we can do simple print statements, we can do simple math, but whenever we want to go further than that, we need to install packages. So let's say we have a Python script that we want to create. And for this, focus on the fact that we want to take we want to raise e to the power 1, and we also want to arrange 0 to 5 in a list format. If we wanted to do this with Python, it would take up a lot of code, or we can import these packages into our script and run it with even less code. So from here, we would see that to take the exponent, we need the math. It's actually a module, not a package, but we would need the math module, which is actually internal to the Python library itself. However, NumPy is its own library and it's external to Python. So we'd actually have to install NumPy. This is where package managers come into play. There's two frequently used package managers. It's either going to be pip or conda. I prefer conda, as it's easier, as we'll see. So we're going to be using conda for this. So we install NumPy using conda, and from there it will install it in a folder on our computer and will now be accessible. So whenever we go to run this script that requires math and NumPy now, we will get the results that we expect to see. Here we are within VS Code, and let's show this through actually putting the code in and running it. So to start with, we have our file 1, py, and that's up at the top. And then we also have the terminal open up at the bottom. And if you're interested in how to install VS Code, I have a link up at the top as well. So for this, I just want to show, let's just do some simple functions first. So we can do things like 1 plus 2. And this is just to show that this is things that are built within Python itself. So if we save this file, I press Command S, and then I go and run this file. So using Python file 1 py, it will run. So it tells us 3, and then it also tells us hello world. But like I said previously, we want to do some more complicated features. So let's start with the math function first. So we're going to import math, and then from here, we're going to execute it. So we can go and do print, we'll do math.exponential, and we'll do it of 1. Okay, so it is now, we just saved it by pressing Command S. I'll come down to the terminal and I'll run this file again. Okay, and so whenever I run it, we can see that we get the value that we would expect to see. So this is just a simple example of importing it in. And math, like I said, is a module within Python. So let's move into the next part. So let's say we're going to use NumPy to arrange our values. So we can go in and say import NumPy, okay? And then from there, we want to print numpy.arrange, and we want to arrange it 0 to 5. We're going to run this example without installing NumPy via the package manager because I want to show what would happen if you tried to do this. So if I go down here and we clear things up. So if I come down here and we type Python file and we want to run this again, whenever I go to run it, it's going to give me this error. It's going to say, hey, this module is not found. There's no module named NumPy. So this shows, right? Hey, math is actually installed, but NumPy we need to install. So I'm going to clear again. Now I'm going to go in and install NumPy. And I want this NumPy and I want this specific version. So I press enter and it's going to go through and install NumPy. It's going to ask us, it tells us that the following new package will be installed. And I'm fine with all of these being installed. I'll type yes. And from here, I'll clear the screen and I will execute the code again to see. And as we can see, we got the results that we expected. NumPy installed properly, our math function worked properly, and NumPy worked properly as well. So there you have it. That's a quick recap of packages and package managers. And just to clarify, right, package managers, you can have two different types. Usually you'll see either pip or conda using the Anaconda distribution. On this channel, we focus on data science and data analytics, so we'll be using conda. But if you want to use something that's a little bit more flexible, you may consider using pip as your package manager. To understand virtual environments, it's best to understand what the problem is virtual environments are trying to solve. So take this operating system and we're operating within, let's say, a single or just no virtual environment whatsoever. And take our previous example. Let's say we still have it on our computer. Let's say we did this back in 2017 or 2018, a couple of years ago, and we were using Python 3.6.12. And at the time of making this script, it worked fine, it worked perfectly, even as shown on the computer in the previous example. Okay, now it's a few years later, and we pop open our terminal and we hear that Python is updated, and we need to write a new script that we want to do new stuff with. So popping open our terminal, we decide we're going to update Python to the newest version while also updating NumPy as well. And this is going to update our versions within our local folders. Then we go in and we create this new file that we want to create, and we run it, and it runs perfectly. It's running perfectly fine. The problem we may run into is now if we go in and run the first file, it may not run properly because the versions for Python and NumPy have now changed. Just to be clear, this isn't trying to say you should never update your versions. You should just maintain the same versions because if I update my versions, it's going to break my code. No, it runs into certain cases where sometimes whenever you update your versions or install new packages, you're going to run into problems with your code, and it may cause conflicts and cause your code to break. So that's why we're using these virtual environments to solve this problem. Jumping into VS Code, let's look at how you could run into this problem if you're not using virtual environments. So our script, this file 1py, I updated it slightly to include a little bit more information. But right now, if we run Python and file 1py, it's working properly and we have no issues. So now let's say we're starting a new project and we recently found out that Python got upgraded, and so we want to update it. We can update all of the packages. And it's asking if we want to update them. Yes, we do. And also we want to install Python and upgrade it to the newish version of Python 3.8. And we say yes. Okay, so now Python is upgraded to that new version. And so we're going to go ahead and clear this. So let's go ahead and create a new file. Come over here and click the documents icon. Click on our desktop, that's where we're working right now, and we'll create this new file. So file2.py, okay, and press enter. Okay, file.2py is open. Let's go ahead and insert some code into here. We know we're going to be using NumPy, so we'll go ahead and import NumPy. Also, we're going to be, we want to just mess with an array. So NumPy is good for creating an array, and then we can also print it. So I'll go ahead and save it. And then let's go ahead and close this. Let's run our second file. So Python file2.py, and we can see that it runs perfectly fine. It outputs the 0 and 1 as expected. Now, whenever we go in and we execute the first Python file though, so this file right here, we go and execute it, we get this error, this value error, and it raises this exception. And that's because of how we built it. It causes that error with that upgraded version of Python and NumPy. Now that we understand the problem that virtual environments are trying to solve, let's go into how we can implement a solution using Conda to manage virtual environments. To be clear, Conda is not the only solution for virtual environments. Another popular option is venv, and similarly, you'll see people use pip and venv, or they'll use Conda. I like Conda because you can use it as your package management manager and also use it as your virtual environment manager. And so it's a sort of a bundled solution, great for data analytics or data scientists like myself. So let's jump in. Let's walk over the basics that we're going to go through to use virtual environments for executing our Python scripts. So let's say we're starting fresh again. And we're starting with you're on your computer operating system and you have your terminal or your command prompt. And from here, the first thing that you would want to do is actually create your virtual environment. And so here I'm creating my virtual environment using Conda. It's naming it that venv1, and it's using Python version 3.6. And from there, I want to actually activate that virtual environment that I call venv1. And so from now it is activated, and you can see it's sort of replicated here, and it has the Python inside of the virtual environment itself of the 3.6.12. Okay, so now we want to execute this script itself, similar to our first file 1.py, and it requires math, which is inherent to Python, but then also NumPy. So we use the package manager inside of Conda to install NumPy. And one thing key to note is to know that you're in that virtual environment is with your command prompt, you're going to see in parentheses venv1, and that shows that you're in that virtual environment. And so we know we're installing NumPy into that location right there. Now, whenever we go to run this file, it's going to run with no errors because it has everything that we need within that virtual environment. And then just running through quickly for the second virtual environment, we would create a virtual environment. It would install Python. From there, we'd have the Python file we need. We'd install whatever version of NumPy we may need. And then, but they still both would work because they're both in their own separate virtual environments. And as you can see, they have different versions of Python and different versions of NumPy. So jumping into VS Code, let's show how we would create a virtual environment and run our files within this virtual environment. So the first thing we want to do is actually create this virtual environment. So we would type conda create. Then the name we want to create, name the virtual environment. So that would be venv1. And then also we want to use Python 3.6 for this. From here, I would press enter. And it's saying, hey, do you want to install the new packages within this virtual environment? And yes, we do. So we're going to click yes and enter. And from here, we're going to have to actually activate this environment. Okay, so we can type this conda activate to activate it here, but then our Python interpreter itself in VS Code is still going to be using this environment right here. So I'm going to show you a quick way to actually solve this instead of doing flipping through all those different things. The simplest way is to just close out of VS Code and then relaunch it with the new interpreter. So I'm going to close out of it. So I'm going to quit out of VS Code for good measure. And then from here, I'm going to open VS Code. And it opens the files back up. And I'm going to exit out of these warning messages. And then from here, I'm going to select the virtual environment that I want. So I selected down at the bottom this which Python down here. And I can come in and it will tell the different virtual environments. I restarted VS Code because this wasn't going to appear unless I restarted it. So now I click here and our virtual environment venv1 is right here. And then if I open the terminal by saying new terminal, it will do the conda activate venv1 for me, so I didn't have to type it. And I now see via the parentheses that virtual environment is activated. So I'm going to go ahead and clear. And from here, let's execute the file 1 because that's the one we needed Python 3.6 for. So we'll do Python file 1 py. And it works properly. It output the E's, the array, and then also it says that the code is working. And then just for an example, we're going to go through and create the virtual environment for file 2 as well. So I've gone ahead and created the virtual environment and activated the second virtual environment. And from here I can say we can execute that second file. And it works perfectly fine. But if we went to execute the previous file within this virtual environment, we can see that we're going to get the value error and it's going to be broken. When we're done working in this virtual environment, we can go ahead and deactivate it by typing conda deactivate. And this will just return us to our base Anaconda environment. Our base Anaconda environment isn't something we necessarily want to just operate in all the time. It's like operating in without a virtual environment. I would very much encourage you to use virtual environments for any type of project that you're working on with your Python. So that was a lot to cover for packages, package managers, and virtual environments. So as a quick recap, we talked about packages, what are their importance, why are they used within Python. Then we moved into package managers, and remember we have two different major types used. We use conda, but there also is pip available to install packages. We talked about how to actually use conda to install packages. From there, we moved into the second part of the video where we talked about virtual environments. And the two main virtual environments that we talked about were venv and then also conda. From there, we talked about the problem that virtual environments are trying to solve. And actually, from there, moved into using conda to manage virtual environments within our computer. As a quick shout out, this video is part of a series where we go through to understand the basics to get up and running with Python on your computer. On the next video, we're going to be focusing on how to run Jupyter notebooks within VS Code, some of the different features available, and then we're going to be applying a lot of the tactics from this video and also previous videos into using Jupyter notebooks in VS Code. So if this video series seems interesting, consider subscribing. Also, it'd be awesome if you smash that like button if you found that this virtual environment video was useful, and comment down below on things maybe that I missed out on or that you'd like to learn more about with virtual environments. Hope to see you again.